I'm delighted to introduce Anne Super, who will be reading extracts from her book, A Citizen of the World. Anne was born in 1938 in Warsaw, Poland, to loving parents Hannah and Moses Jacob. At the age of 3, as her family were being marched out of their home by Germans, she was handed over to the milkwoman who saved her life. Anne never saw her parents again. Anne spent the war years as a hidden child in the care of her Aunt Stefania. After the war, she emigrated to South Africa. She married Morris in 1958, and they had 3 beautiful children, Michael, John, and Beth. After many wonderful and exciting years in South Africa, the family emigrated to Manchester, where Morris established a genetics department at Pendlebury Hospital, and Anne set up her own optician's practice in Cheetham Hill. Anne has many passions, including music, gardening, pottery, and travel. Ladies and gentlemen, Anne.
My first memory is seeing an enormous green coat through the bars of my cot. The German officer was saying something, and my parents were packing. There was a tangible atmosphere of fear in the room, and my mother was crying. I remember that man clearly. The man in the enormous green coat. It is imprinted on my mind. Then we were walking outside, and there were also loads of other people also walking, also carrying suitcases, and there were men, Germans, with guns. I think I was about 3 years old. So it must have been around 1941. It's hard to know. I remember whilst we were walking, there was a sort of ditch and a ragged hedge of trees or shrubs, and my mother pushed me to the side into the shrubs, and she said, "Go, run." And I did. Then a woman grabbed me, took me under her arm and ran. I never saw my parents again. The woman was the milkwoman. I have no idea quite how I knew her. It had to have been prearranged. I have no idea whatsoever how long I was with her, but I remember being ill. I must have been crying a lot, and her husband carried me around the whole night. He was nice. He liked me, but she didn't. I was another mouth to feed, in addition to their own children, and there was a big problem. Was feeding, believe me. We ate potatoes, if we were lucky, and drank sour milk, because she was a milkwoman, so we had milk. And sometimes, for a luxury, we had radishes, which they sliced into the sour milk with potatoes. Even now, I think it's delicious. I absolutely love it. Yes, the milkwoman didn't like me. She didn't want me there. She took all the contents of my parents' flat, whatever it was, as payment for looking after me. Then she found a postcard with my Aunt Stefania's address in Poland. The aunt who was married to Uncle Antek. Since the milkwoman was illiterate, she asked the village scribe to write a letter. In this letter, she said, I've used all the money that was in the flat and all the furniture and everything else. Now I want a lot of money or she's out on the street. When Aunt Stefania received the letter, she understood that this was a very real threat. She had no money. She was a teacher and asked the father of a pupil to fetch me. Since he worked on the railways, he had a travel permit. Of course, we couldn't travel inside the railway carriage on the way back. The inside was just for Germans, so we travelled on the top. Can you imagine that? With a 3-year-old child. I never saw that man again. He took a hell of a risk. I think the war was a time when people just did things they thought were right, with any thought of the consequences. I've had 4 names. I was born Anna Monique Jakub. I became Anulka Stashevich when I lived with Genia, Matusha and Witold. When Aunt Stefania and Uncle Jan adopted me, I became Anna Monica Lixman. Then I married Morris and became Anne Super. That one was fine. Morris was adamant that I must tell my story, and all my friends told me I've got to do it. As many people as possible need to know the survivors' stories. I've not spoken about it for many, many years, so I'm doing so now. I'm a Jew. I know in every single cell in my body that I am a Jew and nothing else. I had a terribly deprived childhood because nobody loved me. Nobody was mine. I had no mother, no father, no aunt even. I had an aunt. She was very good, and she fed me and she looked after me. But she didn't love me. I owe her my life. That was horrible. But I don't blame her for that. I mean, the adult me doesn't blame her one bit for not loving me, but the young one had to fend for herself. However, when I arrived in South Africa, Jan and Stefania loved me. I've always felt that was miraculous. My real parents died having no other children. Neither of them reached 30. They were simply robbed of their life. That was all the life that they were allowed. All that was left was me. And I've always had this feeling that I've got to live everything. I have to experience everything. I have to think it. I have to see it. I have to hear it. I've lived every minute of my life. I've had to, because my parents never could. And no other children that they could make ever could. So everything is on me. Now, on Morris's yahrzeit, I light 16 candles, one for Morris, for my parents, Hannah and Moisha, for Stefania and Jan, for Eric and Ada, Morris's parents, Eric's sister, Prinzi, my grandmother, Regina, Matusha, Felicity, Erwin, and a friend, Esther Neros. There are also 3 for Zygmunt, Janka, and Olenka, who all perished in the Holocaust. I am always on the move, and Morris and I traversed the world together. He said to me just before he died, "Thank you. We had a wonderful life. I think you can't ask for better than that.